that does does a lot of
Okay.
work on our bulk order, and we can figure out what's what's not right, and we can get it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
So glad that you're wanting the materials. And yeah, thanks for letting Jim know that you were having trouble with that. Okay, it is 3:02, so let's get started. Good afternoon. I'm Selena Schwartzfeger with the Mississippi Council on Economic Education. I am sharing my screen right now just as some talking points to remind you of some things. So first of all, welcome to number 3 of a 5-part series that the Mississippi Council on Economic Education is presenting in partnership with the Federal Trade Commission. And probably most of you have been online for number 1 and 2, but if not, we did record those and we will work to make those available for you at a later date. And you have all met Jim. He is our leader through this 5-part series. He is with the Federal Trade Commission. And today he is joined, I see, by Colin McDonald. Welcome, Colin. Thank you for joining us as well. And we look forward to hearing from you. So the Mississippi Council on Economic Education is providing continuing education units for this series if you have participated in all 5. Just so that we can confirm that you're actually participating. And Trina, I know you're listening even though you're in the Bahamas because I can see your face and I know that you're listening. And so we just want to make sure for quality control purposes that if you're somebody who is going to be asking for CEUs, that we actually see that you are engaging with us. And then also, everybody has their name on their screen, but that just also helps us with the report after the fact because Zoom collects that and will tell us that you were online for the webinar. So yes, and then I did have a question about the end of session survey. I know that Jim did a survey on the first one, but we didn't do one last time, so
Uh,
don't worry
I
about that.
Well, I forgot to do it last time, and
Okay,
so you're reminding me that I need to remember to do it this time. So if it's okay, I'll put that
please
at
do.
the end of the
Yes.
presentation, and then we can take a few minutes. And because your feedback is super helpful in terms of us knowing whether or not what we're sharing is being effective, or other things that you would prefer to know a little bit more about or go a little bit further in depth. So anyway, it's all very helpful.
Right. So with that, I'm just going to turn this over to Jim. He
Okay.
knows what to do, and I'm here if I'm needed.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much, Selena. I wonder if in the chat, if you feel like sharing, if you can tell us just a little bit about who you teach, like what age range you teach and what subjects, just so we get a sense as we're going through identity theft, because I think this topic is particularly helpful because it's just part of a basic financial education to understand how important one's credit is to one's life, one's future financial life. So I think it's great if we just get a sense. Okay, I'm seeing some good things here. 7th and 8th, social studies, 6th grade, gifted ed, 5th grade. Yeah, nice. Kindergarten. Oh, wow. Okay, awesome. Okay, that's great. Cool. Okay, well, thanks again, Selena. So good afternoon. I'm Jim Kreidler, and I'm here with my co-presenter and colleague, Colin McDonald. Um,
Hello, everyone.
there he is. We will be taking turns presenting today. We're from the Federal Trade Commission, the nation's consumer protection agency. So you guys all know that by now because we're on number 3. Some of this may be a little bit repetitive, but for those that haven't been here, we'll touch on some things that we've said before. So before we start, let me tell you a little bit about the FTC. As the nation's consumer protection agency, the FTC works to stop fraud, deception, and unfair business practices. We do it through enforcement. We do investigations, and we sue companies and people that break the law, and we try to get money back to people wherever possible. Through education and outreach, the FTC tells people about their rights, and we also tell businesses about their responsibilities. And we do that in print, online, in person, or virtually as we are today. The FTC shares how to spot and avoid scams, how to report scams, how to talk about scams with anyone, and knowing that talking about scams with anyone protects not just yourself, but also the people that you're speaking with about them, because there's a lot of studies that show that if a person knows about a scam, they are much more likely to be able to avoid it. Finally, the FTC's mission is to protect consumers, and that includes overseeing issues related to privacy, and that includes identity theft, which is our focus today. So we'll start off today with a little bit about what we know about identity theft from FTC data. Then we'll take a closer look at how identity theft happens. And by the end of this session, you'll know what identity thieves want to steal and why, steps that your students can take to protect their personal information, and how to spot and report identity theft. We'll also highlight some free resources that you can use in your classes, and we'll have some time for discussion and Q&A at the end. But before we do that, let's do a little warm up. Here's a little informal quiz if you want. If you'd like to participate, please put your answers in the chat. So how many of you have experienced some type of identity theft or know someone who has? Maybe it's a family member, a friend, or maybe it's a topic that's come up in class and maybe some of your students. Okay, yes, okay, I have me, Selena, yes, okay, I have, wow, okay, so it's a lot of folks. So it's not surprising. Identity theft is a very common problem. In 2024, the FTC got 1.1 million reports of identity theft through the FTC's identitytheft.gov website. So that's a lot, and it does affect lots of folks. And with that, I'll turn it over to Colin for question number 2.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. I'm Colin MacDonald, and I'm an attorney in the FTC's Northwest Regional Office here in Seattle, or as I like to refer to it, the better Washington. And I'm excited to be part of this webinar to help you teach students about identity theft and keep their personal information safe. My day job is mostly the enforcement side of things, and I will tell you that one of the most important things to me is being able to see that people are able to protect themselves and either prevent themselves from being harmed by scams, or to cut off the damage as quickly as possible as soon as they realize it's happening. Because as much as we do try to put a stop to things and to return money to consumers, we can't always get 100% of the money back to people. And so the best way to prevent people from being harmed is to make sure they don't get scammed in the first place. And so here's question 2, and please put your information in the chat. What are some of the ways people find out that someone stole their identity? And I can see a lot of good answers already in the chat. It looks like we've got a perfect score from the class. And so we'll just talk through these. What are some of the ways people find out that someone stole their identity? It can be unexpected bills. It can be calls from a debt collection agency. It can be new accounts on their credit report. It can be that they were denied credit with no reason that they can figure out. It can be any and all of these, and it's not an exhaustive list either. There are many different ways that it can show up. It's why it's important to be on guard for and on the lookout for anything that looks weird on a credit report. And it looks like lots of you got that right. Frankly, there was no way to get it wrong, because all of these are ways that people could experience identity theft and first notice that it's happened to them. With that, so let's move on. And as we mentioned in the first question, the FTC got about 1.1 million reports of identity theft in 2024. And if you take a look at the data on the screen now, you can see data from the first quarter of 2025, and things are on a similar pace. The FTC has gotten nearly 366,000 reports of identity theft so far this year alone. And we know that is likely an undercount. I have seen academic organizations have tried to estimate the total number of identity theft instances and the total level of loss because of it. And usually it's several million cases of identity theft and tens of billions of dollars lost by consumers to identity theft, because we know that those 1.1 million reports that we got last year, not everybody who experienced identity theft reported it, because maybe they didn't realize that it happened to them. Maybe they didn't know where to go. Maybe they didn't know how to spot it. And maybe they didn't think that reporting it would do anything. And so I'm happy to be here to help share with you some reasons why reporting it is important, why keep being on the lookout is important, and why there are things that can be done. So what is identity theft? Identity theft happens when someone uses your or your student's personal information without their permission to open accounts, to make purchases, and to commit fraud. Identity theft can happen to anyone, even kids and young adults, and it can affect them by damaging their credit history before they've even had a chance to build it. I sometimes think of identity theft as a particularly terrible kind of scam because it essentially can steal money from people that they don't even have. It's an important topic to teach kids about because identity theft can limit a young person's options in the future. It may be more difficult for them to get a credit card, rent an apartment, get insurance, or even get a job. And Selena, I see your comment that maybe they don't know that we track this, and that's one of the reasons why we are so happy to have you all going out there to let everyone know. And while we are hoping you will tell your students this, please also feel free to tell random strangers, people you meet in a grocery store, your friends, your family. Everybody should learn these lessons, and we're happy to have you joining our team to help spread the message. What do identity thieves want? Identity thieves want to steal pieces of information that they can use. Things like your student's name, social security number, and date of birth. With those pieces of information, identity thieves can apply for credit cards or get services. For example, they can apply for a loan or even set up a bank account with your student's information, which is why protecting this information is so important because it's so valuable and it unlocks access to so much else. So how do identity thieves get your students' information? Unfortunately, there are a lot of ways this can happen. Maybe a thief stole your student's wallet or phone. Maybe your student's online accounts got hacked or their information was compromised in a data breach. Data breach exposes your student's information, but identity theft happens if someone misuses it. Your students don't need to file an identity theft report unless there is some indication that the information has been used. I think we have all experienced getting the email letting us know that our name was in a data breach, and that's a good indicator that it's a good time to take a look at our credit, but that alone does not mean that our identities have been stolen. The other thing to remember is that some thieves even search mailboxes and dumpsters to find your students' information, which can also give the bad guys access to their family credit cards or even online banking accounts. I think in 2025, we often think about the high-tech ways that people are going to come after us, and we forget that the old-fashioned ways are still taking place. There are still people who will root through your garbage. There are still people who will look over your shoulder when you're putting in your PIN number at the bank. You've got to, unfortunately, not only learn about all the new stuff, but remember all the old stuff too. And so both practicing good digital habits, but also just practicing good habits around your information and keeping it secure when possible. So we've mentioned some of these things, but once thieves have your students' personal information, there's a lot of things they can do with it. They can buy things and open accounts in your student's name. For example, they might buy things with a student's credit cards. They might get new credit cards in a student's name. They might open up a phone, electricity, or gas account in your student's name. They might use your student's health insurance to get medical care, or they might use it to get unemployment benefits. They might even use that information to get a job or to pretend to be one of your students when they're arrested. And so one of the things that can happen, particularly with students, is, or anybody who's under the age of 18, is if their identity is stolen before they turn 18 and when they're not taking a look at their credit and maybe their parents aren't thinking to take a look at their credit, what winds up happening is they turn 18 and they go to do get their first job or get their first apartment and suddenly realize they somehow have a decade-long history of irresponsible credit that isn't theirs, but at the same time, the creditors don't know that. And all they know is that somebody who had their social security number and their date of birth signed up for that account. So now that we've talked about the information identity thieves want and what they do with it, we can talk about some specific examples of how identity thieves steal information from young people. Oh, I see another couple of good comments in there. Allowing a trusted person to help you fill out your FAFSA. I mean, really anything, somebody who helps fill out your taxes. Unfortunately, any time when you are giving information to someone who you think is a trusted source, if that person is not actually either the person that they say they are, or even if they are the person that they say they are, and they're not as trustworthy as you think they are, it is entirely possible that that person can steal it. And, you know, Hope, you raise a really good point. There is identity theft that is targeting people who, you know, thieves will steal identity information from people they know. And that can be just because they feel a need and it's a crime of opportunity. It can be targeted and malicious with an intent to harm. Unfortunately, this can come up in a lot of different ways. And that's why even among people who you know and you generally trust, it's important not to share this information unless there's a specific need for that person to know that information. And keeping an eye on how they get that information and how it's used is really important, even if it's somebody who you normally know and trust. We will get to how to check credit in a little bit because there's good news. It has gotten easier and easier, but we'll get to that in a minute. We're still unfortunately talking about the bad news, but we will get to the good news part. So one of the tactics that the FTC has heard about a lot in recent years is that identity thieves are phishing, and that's phishing with a PH at the beginning, and they're looking for answers to security questions through quizzes, through online personality tests, and quick surveys that a lot of kids, and not just kids, love on social media. If you think about any time you have set up one of those recovery questions for a password that you create and they ask the name of your first pet, well, if you also put the name of your first pet into a quiz that's going to tell you, which character from your favorite movie you are, then that's information that whoever is running that quiz could use. So those online quizzes may have seemingly harmless questions, but the more information your students share, the more they risk it being misused. Scammers could do a lot of damage with just a few answers that give away your students' personal information. Thieves use quiz answers to try and reset accounts, letting them steal bank and other account information. Some scammers hack social media accounts and then send malware links to friends of the hacked social media account holder under the guise of sharing a quiz. And I don't know if any of you use social media, but I have certainly gotten messages that look like they're coming from a friend of mine, and then it is telling me that I should take some quiz or sign up for some contest or something like that. So even sometimes when it looks like it's coming from a trusted source, you have to take a closer look. So another example of a story is that Jeff, a teenager who reported a scam when he encountered the FTC on our website, reportfraud.ftc.gov. Jeff is not his real name. We're using a fake name to protect his privacy, and we'll talk in a few more minutes about how to report frauds and scams to the FTC. Here's what Jeff reported. He said, quote, "I was on a gaming app playing a war game. I clicked to get 3 times the prize for watching an ad. Right after it was done, I went to a website that said that if I take a survey, I could win an iPad. The survey asked for personal information. There was also a timer in it that said I couldn't win if the timer runs out, probably to make people do it faster and think less. I didn't click further into it to see the rest of it." And so Jeff did the right thing there. When Jeff realized that it looked like something was off, he stopped. He said, "This seems wrong. These people are putting me under a lot of pressure." One of scammers' favorite things to do is to create a time pressure and to make people think that they need to act quickly, they can't take a beat, ask a trusted friend about whether something sounds too good to be true. I will be honest, people call the FTC fairly frequently, and sometimes it winds up actually routing to my phone. And I have been asked by people the question of, "Hey, this sounds sketchy." And often if that's the case, just taking that minute, taking a beat, you can go to our website, see if you see scams that look like it. And think about whether something really needs to be acted on urgently, because often that is just a tactic to make you not take your time and think about things. Scammers are using prizes and time pressure to trick your students into sharing their personal information. These are a common scam tactic, so please tell your students if they encounter offers with a prize or if they're being pressured to do something, it's very likely a scam. As I'm sure you have heard in any number of contexts, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So another thing that we're seeing more and more are these QR codes that are all over the place. Scammy QR codes are another way thieves may take information. QR codes seem to be everywhere now. Your students may have scanned a QR code to see the menu at a restaurant or to pay for public parking. They might have used a QR code on their phone to get into a concert or a sporting event or to board a flight. There are countless other ways to use them, and they can be very useful, and it explains their popularity. Unfortunately, scammers hide harmful links in QR codes to steal the information. I'd be fascinated to know if there's anybody here who can look at a QR code and tell me directly by looking at it what it goes to. I doubt they can. And so you've got to be careful when you're scanning that, whether it's really what it claims to be, because unlike a link where you can just read it and type it in yourself and make sure it looks right, you can't really do that with a QR code. So scammers sometimes cover up QR codes on parking meters with one of their own. They might send your students a QR code by text message or email and make up a reason for them to scan it. They might have a supposedly suspicious activity report or a problem on an account or even a missed package delivery. These are all, of course, lies to get your students to scan the QR code and open the URL without thinking about it. Here's the problem with scammy QR codes. Scanning one could install malware on your students' phones, stealing information before they realize it, or it could take your students to a spoofed site that looks real but isn't. And if they log in there, scammers could steal any information that they enter. I don't have very many nice things to say about scammers, but I will say this, they're extremely adaptable. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim.
Okay, thanks so much, Colin. So as Colin mentioned, sometimes identity theft happens in ways that we don't have any real control over, right? Like things like data breaches happen, and that's very difficult to control or, really get one's arms around. But there are steps that students can take to help protect their information. And here are kind of maybe 4 or 5 different takeaways that you can convey to your students about, protecting one's personal information. So number 1 is remind your students that their personal information has value. As we've seen, scammers will go to great lengths to try and steal your students' personal information simply because it is valuable. Second, remind your students that the people that they meet and encounter online are not always who they say they are. And anyone who asks for their personal information online or in person could be a scammer. Finally, tell your students to never give out their personal information. And I think a lot of students do know this because it's something that, is emphasized and talked about from a very young age. But, scammers are great at throwing people off balance and, claiming they're someone to try and get you or them to give personal information. So never give out personal information, social security number, date of birth, address to anyone who contacts them unexpectedly. And then finally, use strong passwords and two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication really helps because it provides just another layer that scammers have to get through and makes it more difficult for them. Okay, so I think earlier Hope and Selena asked about, okay, so what are some of the ways that kids can actually check their credit reports? So the news here is kids under 18 generally don't have a credit report. And as you all know, credit reports list things like car loans, mortgages, and credit cards. You can help protect your students by asking them to talk with their parents and go to this great website, annualcreditreport.com. So if your student gets with their parents and then they go to annualcreditreport.com and they type in their social security number, and there's no credit report, it's very likely that there's no identity theft for that social security number. If they find that for that kid or that student that there is a credit report, it's likely that there is identity theft. So that's something to have your students. It is free. It is free. Um, so let's see. So here's one of
Actually,
the.
Jim, if I
Oh yeah, sure.
can I jump in for 1 second there? Just
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that although the name remains annualcreditreport.com, as recently as a couple years ago, the credit bureaus that operate that have made it so people can get a report free once a week from each of those bureaus.
Oh, very good point.
That's not what the law requires, but it does. Just because it's annualcreditreport.com does not mean that you have to wait a year every time you want to check.
That's right. Excellent point. Excellent point. Good. Okay, so here's one of the main takeaways. If I was going to say, what's the number one thing that your students can do to potentially reduce their risk of identity theft, that thing is to place a credit freeze on their credit account. So what that is a credit freeze protects them against unauthorized access to their credit file, and it makes it harder for identity thieves to open accounts in their name. In a minute, I'll tell you how you can actually place the credit freeze, but first let me tell you a little bit more about credit freezes. So while a credit freeze is in place on your student's credit report, nobody can open a new account in their name, and not even them, not even the student, not even the parent. So it's a very strong kind of lock on one's credit report. And it's free to place a credit freeze, and it lasts until it's lifted by your student's parents if they're under 16, or the student themselves if they're 16 or older. So now how to do it. Okay, so a key site to remember here is ftc.gov/child IDT, which stands for identity theft. So here, the best way for students to place a credit freeze is to work with their parents to contact each of the 3 credit bureaus, and those are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And you can find that contact and how to handle minors' credit files by going to our site, ftc.gov/child IDT. So if your students don't have a credit report, they or their parents can ask the credit bureaus to create one so they can then freeze it. And then on the credit bureau's website, your students and their parents will need to provide their identification information, including their social security numbers, to set up the freeze. And as I mentioned, it's free to both place the freeze and lift the freeze. So when the time comes, maybe in a few years when they're applying for an apartment or a credit card or to get a phone or a job, whatever they're applying for, they or their parents can lift the freeze at whatever bureau the lender will use to check that student's credit file. So again, it's ftc.gov/child IDT. And if you're online now, check it out and see if that is a useful link there. Okay, probably the other most important place to turn for all things identity theft is identitytheft.gov. So essentially, if someone in one of your classes found out that there's evidence of identity theft after looking up their social security number on annualcreditreport.com, or if they found about identity theft in some other way, here's how they can report it and begin to take the steps they need to recover. So a few things to keep in mind here. First, act quickly. If you know what accounts were compromised, the first thing to do is have your students contact whoever holds those accounts and tell them what happened. Then go to identitytheft.gov as soon as possible. And the great thing about this website is it can help students report. It's very intuitive. It just asks a number of questions and kind of leads you through all the different possibilities of what happened. And then it, at the end, will kind of spit out this proactive report about how one can get started to make a recovery plan. All right, so let's see. We've talked about a lot of different things here. And now's the moment where we can just pause and maybe have a little discussion. Um, I think just maybe building on how we started the session, I asked if any of you had experienced ID theft, or if you have had chats with your students and they've reported similar issues. I guess if any of you care to share your experience, we'd love to hear from you about some of the issues that you've encountered, and then we could talk about those and answer any questions to the best of our ability. So, have you guys experienced some of these issues with kids in your classes, or experienced them yourselves? And how did it work out? And was there anything that maybe helped you spot it or would help your students spot it in the future? And feel free, you can ask verbally or put it in the chat, however you'd like. I'll just take a look here.
May I share?
Yeah.
Okay. I was headed on vacation on Saturday and had all my itinerary and everything, got to the airport and was trying to get boarding pass. Well, it turns out it was all a scam. So who we booked through was not, I guess, not legit, and so ended up having to buy a new ticket and everything to get to vacation.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Trina. That's horrible.
Yes,
So
but
you,
had
so
every,
you,
but
wow, so
yeah,
you
it was
printed out I'm sorry, I have to keep stopping on you. Go ahead.
yeah, I, I printed it out and everything, and the person at uh, Southwest could not. She could only pull up part of it, but she did notice with my ID and my passport and everything that the information was coming from North Carolina, was not my personal information, where I live and everything. It was North Carolina. My name was
Mm,
spelled wrong, and yes. And she told us not, because we were calling trying to get a hold of the people, because it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and she said, "Don't talk to them anymore. It's not legit." She said, "Damn, yes."
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
what happened. I had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
And um, have you, well, I guess you're on vacation, so maybe you haven't done this yet or had a chance, but have you been able to look at your accounts and see if there's any other activity or close the credit card that you paid with? Or,
Well, I'm gonna open them up here
okay.
because it's on Wi-Fi over here, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't want to open until I got back in the States.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Secure Wi-Fi, that is an issue. Um, Yeah, I mean, maybe through your hotel, or like you could get on some kind of secure line and maybe check, or but yeah,
Hmm.
that's horrible. I mean, because yeah, there's
Yeah.
these things spiral, right? It's all, once a theft occurs, then it's like, is that person making other charges on your credit card? Or hopefully they don't have any additional information. But I think, when you do get back, if you are able, um, if you could report it to identity theft, well, go to identitytheft.gov and put in what's happened.
Okay.
And then that, I think, will generate a report for you of what steps to take. It'll also help you like sort through the questions to ask about, has identity theft actually occurred, or was this just like a one-off where they took some money? And hopefully
Oh,
that's the case. But
okay.
but maybe there's also ways to try and recover it. I mean, that's the thing. Like, scammers are so great um, at getting people's money in a way that makes it very hard to recover. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm really
Yeah.
sorry that happened.
Unfortunately, that is a scam that I am familiar with,
Oh, really?
and we are seeing there are impersonators out there pretending to be airlines, and I know that impersonation scams is one of the other units in this 5-part series And I imagine what is most likely is that there was someone who just posed as the airline. And that alone, we would, in my nerdy lawyerly head that has to sort every kind of scam into a different bucket, we would not call that identity theft. That doesn't mean it can't lead to it. And so anytime you realize any scammer has your credit card number for any reason whatsoever, I would highly encourage you to contact the credit card company and say, can you please cancel this? If it's the only credit card you have with you and you're traveling, I understand that can be very difficult. Sometimes the credit card company will say, okay, we'll ship you a new card where you are, what hotel are you staying in? But the good news is, as long as it happened on an actual credit card as opposed to a debit card, there are laws that limit the amount of liability. And so the credit card companies are actually going to want to be on your side because they're actually the ones that are most likely to be out a lot of money if they can't stop it in time. So as soon as you ever realize a scammer has your credit card number, even if you haven't heard anything yet, that's a great time to contact your credit card company and say, please do this, because it's way cheaper for them to print out a new card and mail it to you than it is for them to deal with trying to fight, chase down fraud.
Yes.
And Colin, can you speak to what we do when we get complaints? Like, let's say it's, we get Trina's complaint about this and then others, what does the FTC do to try and go after these companies that are pretending to be airlines?
Yeah, so most of the FTC staff are either attorneys or investigators working on looking at all kinds of scams. And so people like me will potentially be investigating a particular issue, and we will look into what kinds of complaints we've gotten. So we get about 5 million different kinds of complaints per year. That's between identity theft and fraud and violations of the do not call list. But I will admit, we don't immediately have a human being put their eyes on every single complaint, but we do have brilliant data scientists who help us understand where are we seeing more things. And when we do start an investigation or we have identified a new issue, we often rely on those consumer complaints so that we can understand not only what's happening, but how problems are showing up to consumers, how we can find new things. We're a pretty small agency, and we only have about 1,200 employees all across the country. We only have offices in 9 cities. And so it means we really rely on consumers letting us know what they're seeing and how, so we can keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening. But once we have identified somebody who may be violating the law, we can open an investigation. Sometimes we will contact people based on their complaints and say, we'd like to get some more information from you. And that's always optional. If somebody just wants to submit a complaint and then say, I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore, we're happy that they've submitted the complaint. We're happy to have the information. But I will also say, I have had instances where I have contacted a consumer who had submitted a complaint, and that's the consumer who helped me figure out how an entire scam was structured. And we will we will investigate, and if we determine that it is likely that the law has been violated, we will, depending upon exactly what the scam is and what the logical legal strategy is, we'll take them to court. And every now and then I take off my friendly hat and I become a litigator and I go into court and I sue scammers. It is, if you ask me what I do and I want to feel good about myself, I say I sue scammers. And I sue scammers and get injunctions from courts ordering them to stop. And if they don't follow the order, then they're in contempt of court. And if you've ever upset a federal judge, you know very well that that doesn't generally go well for people. And we can get, in many cases, people's money back. And as of April 1st of last year, we now have the impersonation rule, which basically, for lots of weird, nerdy lawyer reasons, means that we've unlocked the ability to get money back for consumers much more quickly and much more easily for scams that rely on impersonating either a business or the government. And so there is now, as of April 1st of last year, a much better way to address that kind of scam. So we're always on the lookout for new information, because the other thing is, you might get unlucky and be one of the first people to experience a new kind of scam or a way that the scam has shifted. And by getting that report from you, we're then able to learn that new thing, keep an eye out, see what scammers are doing, and put a stop to it. They adapt, but we adapt too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thanks so much for sharing, Trina, and I hope this unfortunate thing that has happened maybe can be a lesson that you raise in class, and just show how common these types of scams are, so that kids who I think are largely very trusting about systems and things in the modern world understand that they really can't trust everything that they see online, and that people are not who they say they are, and that they should protect their personal information. I guess if there are no more questions, maybe we'll move along here, just being aware of time. I'm just going to shift it back to Colin here. Yeah. So Colin, do you want to take these?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. And I do want to say thank you, Trina, that it's extremely powerful when people share the stories of how they have been scammed, because one of the things that scammers rely on is people being embarrassed. None of us like to admit that we got tricked. And so often I will tell the story of, I once bought what I thought was a beautiful big light. There was going to be a nice ceiling light on the internet. And I was moving quickly and I wasn't looking closely, and it showed up and it could fit in the palm of my hand. There are scams of all types. And if we normalize talking about it when it happens to us, it makes it easier for people to come forward when it happens. And if you can come forward when you think you've been scammed a little, it can help you stop yourself from being scammed a lot. So with that, let's talk about some free resources that you can share with your students. We talked about reporting just a moment ago, but at ftc.gov/identity theft, you'll also find links to several articles on the topics that we've covered today and more. Like what to know about tax identity theft and child identity theft. You'll also find links to videos, resources for advocates, businesses, and more. All this information is also available in Spanish. And at ftc.gov/languages, you can find a flyer on identity theft in 12 languages. If you want to hand out printed copies of identity theft materials, as we've mentioned, those are available for order at ftc.gov/bulk order. If you go on there and you find that there are things that you want that are on back order or not available, two things. One, let us know, because when we know what is in demand, we know what to print more of. The other thing is, if you go on that website, you can find a PDF of almost everything. So I have, on occasion, when knowing I was going to an event and waiting too long to go online and order it even internally, I have then gone and printed out a bunch of copies of the PDF. And so if you realize that tomorrow you're giving a presentation about something and want to use something, download the PDF and print it. We are not precious about our copyright there, I promise.
There actually is no copyright. Everything is in the public domain. Yeah. So yeah, it's all available. And
these resources are valuable tools for your schools. They're free and they're easy to use. Please share them as widely as you wish. We also mentioned that a credit freeze was the #1 way to protect from identity theft. And I really think that's true. I have been asked on multiple occasions, is there any reason that I shouldn't just always have a credit freeze on my account? And neither I nor any of my colleagues have come up with a good reason that you shouldn't. So maybe there is one, but a bunch of people who do this for a living haven't come up with one. And so the information you see on this slide is available in print in English and Spanish. You can order free print copies of this card from ftc.gov/bulk order for your classes. If you're online now, feel free to go to ftc.gov/bulk order and order some. The same information is available in multiple languages, again, at ftc.gov/languages. Pass it back to Jim.
Okay, thanks so much, Colin. Okay, this will be a familiar slide for those of you that have been on some of the other webinars, but I'll just mention it here as well. So since we've been talking about helping your students know who they're dealing with online and protecting their personal information, especially for those of you that teach younger kids, I want to mention UVille. It's our program. It's a free educational program with tools to help teach kids ages 8 to 12 how to safely navigate the online world. And it's It covers privacy and online safety, which we're talking about today, digital citizenship, understanding advertising, and spotting and avoiding scams. And here are the materials for UVille. It includes lesson plans that you can download, activity sheets, a key, slides, poster, and a bookmark, all really useful things. I'll also just point out a few other highlights for us. Consumer.gov, again, a free resource that shares consumer protection basics, all designed to focus on the action steps to take in any given situation. And consumer.gov covers your money, credit, debt, college careers and schools, cars, and our topic today, identity theft and scams. Finally, we mentioned this before, but there's a lot of different ways to report fraud and scams at ftc.gov/languages. It's a great resource. And also there you will see how to avoid scams. These are publications now, what to do if you paid a scammer, a fraud handbook, and a number of others. Let's see. We mentioned this earlier, but I'm putting it up again just because it's such an important site. Identitytheft.gov is the place to go if you think that your or your students have issues with identity theft. And there, again, you can report what's happened and get an action plan for the steps to take to begin to recover. All right, let's see. I think UVille lessons would be great for my high school. Yeah, awesome. I agree. Yeah, UVille has these really nice lesson plans that you don't have to be an expert in the topic. You can really just download them, take a look at them, and they're divided into like warm-ups and mini lessons and different segments that I think work really well for classes. Okay, and then finally, we would love to stay in touch. And if you'd like to stay in touch with us, this is the place to go to sign up for our consumer alerts. It's ftc.gov/consumer alerts. We write blogs about different consumer topics and publish them probably 3 or 4 times a week. And it's a great way to stay in touch with us about, things that are happening. And I think relevant financial education tools that you may be able to use in the classroom. And with that, we will take whatever questions you have. And if you think of other questions that you want to ask us later, you can also email us at jkreidler@ftc.gov or Colin McDonald, cmcdonald@ftc.gov. But any questions that we can answer now?
Yes, I have one. I have
Sure,
a
go ahead.
relative who has paid for credit lock, but if this information is free, do I need to tell her to stop the payment and go online and do it yourself? Are those companies legit?
Well, let's see.
They may.
Go ahead, Colin.
They may very well provide services. I don't know what company specifically it is. I don't know exactly what their product is. They might provide things above and beyond the credit freeze. But if all they're doing is providing a credit freeze, then that is something that can be done free of charge. And so I generally advise people that if they can get something for free, not to pay for it, but to each their own. But it's worthwhile to make sure that that relative knows that they have the option of doing this free of charge, and then they can make that choice for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and one really can do quite a lot for free, like just going to annualcreditreport.com. You can look at your entire credit file. And I do think, I agree with Colin. I think there are ways that one can do a lot of these things. Yeah, so any other questions? Let's see. Yeah.
On the topic of doing things free, I think particularly when it has to do with our financial lives, I think there are a lot of products out there that are marketed to us as being free, and that is because we do not actually pay a dollar amount for them, but we pay for it with our data. And bear in mind that when someone signs up for something like that, where they're being told, oh, well, we'll use your information to get you personalized offers. The reason that someone is giving something for free if it's not because the government has told them they had to, or because they play some part in the system where giving something away makes things better for them, because they're monetizing it some way. And so a lot of those services, even though they tell you they're helping you keep track of your information, if it's something that is being provided to you, that you're providing this information, they may be looking to monetize it. And again, up to you whether that's something you're comfortable with, but go in with open eyes and know whether the information you're giving up is worth more to you than what you're getting in return.
Very good point. Yeah. I hope some of this is useful in terms of, your lessons on financial education. It is something that kids, especially after they turn 18, will need to be able to manage as they come into adulthood, because it's a very important thing to protect one's personal information. And so hopefully you've gotten some tools here that are useful. Any other questions in the chat, or anybody have any others? Well, I guess with that, we will say thank you very much, and we will see you next week to talk about online influencers and reviews. So thank you very much, Selena. Thank you all for joining us. And
thank you all. I never had a personal finance course while I was in grade school. So I got to say, I'm really happy to see that there's so much interest in providing that education.
Oh my goodness. You know what? Before I sign off, I totally forgot about
You're going to do the survey.
Yeah, I'm going to do the survey. Let's see if I can get to it in time. Find it. Survey.
Thanks, Dorothy.
Thanks. You're so right. Thank you. Find it. Okay, I'm just going to put it in the chat. So slow. Well, I may have missed my chance here. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Okay, it's kind of a long. Is that right? Let's see. Does it work? Okay. Are you guys able to click on that link and go to the questions? I think it's 5 questions about whether or not. Okay, great. So glad to hear. Thank you all very much for doing it. We really appreciate it. That's so cool, Hope. Very good to hear.
That's wonderful. And please tell this to everyone, not just your students.
All right. Well, do you hear me? Sometimes my okay, cool. Yeah. All right. Well, everyone, you can continue filling out the form on your own. And thank you for being here with us today, Trina. I hope that you continue to have an amazing time where you are, and you'll have to let us know when you get home how the reporting goes of your scam that happened to you. And Yeah, we look forward to seeing you next week, which is the topic I am most looking forward to. And I felt like it would really be something your students would be interested in hearing about. So anyway, we'll see you next week. And I hope everybody has an amazing, amazing week.
Okay, thanks so much, Selena.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks,
Okay.
Colin.
Okay, thanks a lot. See you later.
Thank you all.
Okay, bye-bye.